It's been a journey, and it's been an interesting process. And I'm right now in January of this year, I did start an interim position at another institution. Had a great spring semester there. A great institution with outstanding human beings first and foremost, and then exceptional professionals as well. Both in student affairs and other parts of the institution. So that's been a great kind of I don't know if it's a rebound, if you'd say, but it's been a great experience to go to another institution and have just a great support, great welcoming, great colleagues to work with. You don't get that every place, in your course of your career. So I've been feel very fortunate in that regard. And it's something that I've extended, or the institution and myself have agreed to extend going into the next academic year. So staying in that interim role probably for another academic year. So that's been helpful. Like I said, it's been a journey and a great learning experience, and kind of lots of time, especially in the fall when not working, for reflection and insight and so forth. And I would a couple of things I will recommend that maybe we can talk about during the course of the conversation if anybody finds themselves in this situation. What was very helpful to me, and what helped me to kind of come to best understand the situation, and then also to continue to move forward. Because, like, in my mind, I've been in the field a number of years, I guess called a seasoned professional, if you will, but not at a point where I was ready to call it a day. Feel like they've still wanted to continue to contribute and assist and support students, and work with great colleagues along the way.
And I think with the interim piece, I was thinking how with you extending it another year, it's interesting because you've created some stability in the instability, if that makes sense. Like,
exactly.
That must feel, I know I did an interim gig this spring, and there was something nice about just having the routine, being in the familiar higher ed setting. And I think we're fortunate in higher ed that there are opportunities for interim work where we can go in and almost do the same type of job that we've been doing before at a different institution, where I think of other people who have been in the news of losing their job and being laid off, and there aren't often these types of interim opportunities available to them. How did you learn about the opportunity you're at? Was it more your network, or was it like through an agency or something?
No, it was through the network. Somebody that I knew through a professional organization I'd belonged to for a number of years and thought very highly of. Literally reaching out to me in December, at the end of the calendar year and near the end of the fall semester, and saying, "Hey, we have a potential opening. Is this something you'd be interested in?" And I said yes. And geographically, it was beneficial for me as well. So I had a conversation with that individual that I knew, and then they put me in touch with the person who was my supervisor for this past semester, and had a great conversation with that individual. And it was literally, I think, probably right after Christmas that we both sides said, "All right, let's do this," and kind of put it together. And a couple of weeks later, I was on campus starting the position. So the network was, that was a key piece. And I think that's something I would say for anybody is if you find yourself in this situation is continue to maintain those relationships with the folks in your network, of either former colleagues at other institutions or friends that you've established over the course of your career. Because they can be, in my case, they were extremely valuable from a support standpoint, and kind of being there to listen when you wanted to talk, as well as people who had their eyes and ears out there for potential opportunities for the next step for me. So that I can't say that enough, that if you find yourself in that situation, to utilize, continue to maintain the relationships and utilize the folks that are in your network, because they can be extremely valuable and also very supportive as well.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting because I know for me at first, I don't know, there's this sense that a lot of times people don't talk about it when their jobs are eliminated or they're laid off or whatnot. And I think that my initial intent was, I should let people know, well, for lots of reasons. One, I think I wanted to control the narrative about what was happening, but also I feel like I wanted other people to know that you're not alone in this. But I think if you don't let people know about your situation, they may have a great opportunity, whether it's full-time permanent role or an interim role, that they might not share with you because they don't know that you'd be interested in looking, especially with an interim role. They might be like, oh, John, you've been at this company for 20 years. Why would you be interested in this interim role? So unless you talk about it, people don't know.
Yeah, and I 100% agree, because I think the other piece was, again, especially for me being at an institution for an extended period of time, I wanted to, like you said, put the narrative out there, let people know, be transparent, because I didn't want people reaching out and then finding, oh, wait, he's not there any longer. What happened to him? Where is he? That type of thing. To me, that was, a decision was made by other individuals, and this was the result. It was not something that I did. So I wanted, to be respectful and let people know, here's where I'm at. And like I said, especially I think in our field of student affairs, with so caring and a lot of compassionate people who, rally around folks when they need that support. And so I knew part of that was the nature of the people in the field and our work. People, I thought, and fully acknowledge that people were very receptive and very helpful in the whole process going forward.
So in thinking about, in addition to telling people, just coping with this process, especially in the fall when you weren't working, at time to reflect, like I'm a firm believer in using our strengths in moving forward, that, it's easy to get caught up in worrying about things and negative feelings when these happen. And I'm not saying there's not a space for, grieving and for feeling bad and for some worries, because it is a worry to lose your job. Losing income, you could be losing benefits if you're the person. So it's not to take that away, but I also feel like when we need to move forward and we need to, I guess, not only like heal from that, but like thrive and find another role, that it's really important we use our strengths. Like that's what pulls us up. And so I'm wondering, and thinking about that, what strengths you've used in this process?
A few things come to mind. One, I think I'm a person of faith, so I think that was very important for me. Having people in that area of my life who were, again, very supportive and very helpful. And I'm a believer that, this happened for a reason. There was a purpose. This just didn't happen, that there was a purpose and a reason for this to happen. And I don't know if I've seen the true outcome or fruition of this yet. So that's something that I think gave me hope, gave me confidence in that regard. Looking at my Clifton strengths, one of them is I'm a relator. So as I said earlier, I made a point and was adamant about maintaining contact with folks, because I think, once you're not going to a campus on a daily basis, you're not in meetings, you're not interacting with folks, you're home and you're in a very different environment. So I purposely wanted to maintain that connection with people. And whether that was just talking on the phone or doing a Zoom chat, or for some folks who were more local, was getting coffee or going to lunch. And that was very helpful to me to feel staying connected to, the people, and to some degree, even the environment and the culture that I'd been a member of, even though I was no longer part of that. It was kind of easing out of that, if you will, in some regards. So that was a big piece of it. Like I said, family, I think, was a very big, I had a lot of family and friends who, going back to that network piece, both not so much in the field, but, a lot of people in my family had connections through other industries and other fields. So I had a couple of meetings with folks who were friends of friends. One in particular was a gentleman who had been a CEO of some nonprofits in the past. And so I had a great meeting, actually had two meetings with him to talk about that whole field as a potential transition to the nonprofit sector and so forth. So that was very helpful, of him helping me to see, one, to be aware and have a better understanding of that sector, as well as what strengths and what talents and experiences could I bring to that. And I did actually, during the course of the fall, did apply for a couple positions outside of higher education. Neither one panned out, but it was a good experience. And I think I gained a better insight into that world, and if that was something to do down the road or longer term, what would need to happen or how I would best to approach that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you get locked into, like, I've been in higher ed for, I think, 23 years now this fall. And, you think of yourself as, oh, I'm going to be in higher ed my whole career. But something like this, it makes you think, like, well, am I limiting myself right now by just looking at higher ed jobs? And so you do, I think it makes sense to consider outside. And I guess you only know if something's going to work by exploring it and seeing if that is of interest to you. But this is also, as you said, you never know what the reason is. If you believe this happened for a reason, you never know what that is. And it could also be an opportunity that lies outside of what we're used to.
Yeah. There was a number, to your point, a number of people when I shared this information about my position being eliminated, who had been in higher ed. I got to know them through the course of interactions in higher ed, and who are now no longer in higher ed, but in various different fields. So those folks gave some very good insights, saying, hey, there is life out here. There is life beyond student affairs in higher ed. You may want to look into these. So that was very helpful to see that there were other folks who had successfully made that transition, whether they had to or they chose to do that. So that was encouraging and supportive as well.
Yeah. I don't know why that made me laugh when you said there's life outside student affairs. Like, what? There is?
Well, sometimes we don't, like you said, you think once you're in it and you're doing it and you very much enjoy it, that you feel like you're going to be there for the long haul, but that may not always be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know. What is it? Best laid plans of mice and men. There's some saying like that. So, you talked about sort of the connections and the network and all of that. And this isn't, well, I'm putting you on the spot. So I guess I was going to say this isn't to put you on the spot. But if someone saw this and said, hey, I'd really like to talk to John because he had talked to some people about working in the nonprofit sector. And I'd like to talk about that or how he connected with other people. I mean, I guess, would it be okay if they reached out to you? And if that was okay, like, sort of what's the best way to do that? Like, could they just like connect with you on LinkedIn, or do you have any preference? I guess I hate to enlist you in the RFA army of like support, but I think also that, like, by you stepping up today, like, you're showing people by example that you're doing okay and telling your story. And
yeah, no, I think that probably I would be more than glad and welcome the opportunity to talk to other folks who, again, find themselves in this situation. Probably LinkedIn, probably with, messaging through LinkedIn if we're already connected, or if we're not, doing an invite and then maybe sharing why part of the reason for the invite is to get connected. I would be more than glad to do that. Probably would be the best way to reach out or begin that conversation.
That's helpful. You mentioning sort of if they're not connected with you, to explain in the invite why they want to connect, because I've had a lot of spam since I've been out of work, and I've just had so many people like, oh, we've got this job for you. And I'm like, really? Like, I didn't know I was so popular. Like, every day I get all these bots saying, we've got this job for you. If only it was that easy. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'd be more than glad to have those conversations or to connect with other folks.
Thank you. What tips do you have for other people?
I think a couple of things come to mind. One of the things that was very valuable for me was I had the opportunity after this all started to have a 3-month time period working with a career coach. And that was excellent. And again, if someone is looking for somebody, they can message me, and I would share the name of this person who was outstanding, was exceptional in my mind, and was super helpful to me. But it was really great experience because it was a couple thoughts. It helped me, it'd been a while before I'd worked on my resume or cover letter. So that was very helpful to kind of say, hey, in 2024, get updated and get to the current times with that information. And so that was very helpful. Also helped me with updating and revising my LinkedIn profile to reflect my status, and also, what my intention or the direction I wanted to go forward with. I think the career coach, whether they knew it or not, they had a little bit of a therapist role in there as well, helping you to, listening to and helping you kind of sort out your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings, and kind of be a great sounding board to bring that back to you so you'd have a better understanding of where you're at. So anybody finds themselves in that situation, whether they're looking to stay in their current field or they're looking to transition to some new field, I would highly recommend working with a career coach. And like I said, I was very fortunate to connect with someone who was outstanding in my mind and was very helpful to kind of understand where I was at and where I wanted to go, and then help me to give me the tools to kind of move in that direction. So I think that's one tip. The other great advice I got was from a friend / mentor. About a week after this happened, I was talking to this person and I was all, I'm gung ho, I'm going to get back out there. I got to get back on the horse and, that type of thing. And the person said, well, slow down. You just had a significant loss. You need to grieve this. And I never really thought about that it is, you think of, or I think of grieving obviously as loss of a friend or a loved one, but a loss of a job, definitely has an element of, it's a grieving process as well, because like you said, it impacts your daily life. It impacts your family from a benefit standpoint, from an environment, from a cultural standpoint, salary obviously as well. So that was great advice to say, sit with this and kind of go through to some degree, the grieving process, because it is a loss. It's a loss of identity. It's a loss of relationships. It's a loss of being, part of a team. And for me, I have an athletic background, both high school and college, as well as coached. So for me, part of the work I've always enjoyed was being part of a team and being able to collaborate with others. And then when that was no longer suddenly not there, that's a big loss. And you have to kind of deal with that and kind of work through that. So I think that was a great tip. I'm just looking at some of my notes here. Mentors, and like I said, I've had some outstanding mentors in my career. So those folks, I was able to continue I have maintained relationships with them. And so when this happened, whether it be on the phone or having lunch with them, it was great to sit with them and just to again, if nothing more, they were a sounding board to let me speak, but also gave me some great insights and some great guidance, both on a personal level as well on a professional level. So, and then I think some of the things I learned out of this, and you talked about this in one of your earlier newsletters, about identity, and growing up and our identity with our jobs and so forth. Yeah. When something like this happens, it comes to reality that your identity is not your title. It's not the organization you work with or the people you're affiliated with. That's not your identity. That's a piece of it, but it's not your identity. So that's a transition. And then the other part, which was a great learning experience, was, every position you're in is temporary, whether that's 2 years or 20 years. I've come to realize that, you're just keeping the seat warm for the next person. And that's not to minimize the work that you do, and the contributions you have, but at some point in time, you no longer will be in that position. You no longer have that title. So I think that helps you to reflect more back on you as the individual and the person, and not who you are in that role. Because again, that someday, whether it's of your own doing or somebody else's doing, that is going to come to an end. So that was a great learning experience, and kind of not an aha moment, but it's like, yeah, that's 100% right. You get so wrapped up and, committed and loyal to an institution, and that's great. I'm not bashing that. But at some point, like I said, there will come an end to that. And then so you still, then you are, you're the person, and this is still your life. So you need to understand that as to how that, plays a part of that.
Yeah. Those are all great points, and just great tips for people. So thank you for sharing those. And I was thinking about when you mentioned the coach, how valuable that could be. And for some people that might be tough financially to do that, to afford a coach. But I'm also thinking, looking ahead, and I hate to say this, but I think we're in this reality right now, is, there are always, in higher ed, I feel like I've had my eye on small colleges that are closing. Historically, that feels like that's happening more and more. But what I think I'm seeing now with all of the federal grant funding, some of it being pulled and institutions losing that, there are hiring freezes in places where I've never seen a hiring freeze before at very
Right.
wealthy institutions.
Right.
And you never know if layoffs are coming up related to that. And I think for people who are maybe watching this because they're worried that they could be impacted by that, I'm thinking that might be something that if they were laid off or furloughed, to really look at, is that a point maybe that they could negotiate with their employer a couple of sessions of coaching or something along those lines? Because, I think at the moment, sometimes it's hard to think about what you really need. And I guess if you've been a reluctant free agent, it's hard to go back to your former employer and ask. But I think for people who are in a position right now where they're worried about losing their jobs, that could be something maybe to try and negotiate as part of the process for leaving.
No, I agree 100%. And if you're able to do that through the institution, or if you're not, and again, I recognize, like you said, loss of income, but I think I would flip the script and say, look at it more as an investment in yourself. So if you don't be able to get that resource through your former institution, look at it as a long-term investment into yourself, even though that may be challenging from a financial standpoint. Because like I said, for me, it was extremely beneficial and very helpful to kind of have a best understanding of what I wanted to do going forward and how to best, achieve that. So I can't say enough to say, if you're able to do that, I would highly recommend it.
John, I love that reframe about investing in yourself. And I think right now that is so important for those of us who are reluctant free agents, that we need to realize that we have the right to invest in ourselves. So thank you. I love that. And I'm actually going to use that as our time to stop. I feel like I'd like to stop on I like to. This is my first interview, so who knows what I like to do, but I love that we're stopping on that point. Is there anything before we wrap up that you'd like to say that you haven't said so far?
No, I think we've covered a lot. Like I said, I would be glad to serve as a resource if anybody else, again, finds themselves either currently or down the road. Again, if nothing more, just to share my story and experience. And I've always learned, I've been I'm a big reader of biographies, and I always learn from, although it be people in a variety of different walks of life and different experiences, I think you can always pull something from someone else's experience that maybe is applicable, or you can learn from that. So I'm always, like I said, I'd be more than glad to be helpful to supportive of anybody else who finds themselves in this situation. And then maybe they can take something from my circumstance that may be beneficial for them down the road.
That's great. Thank you. And also, I know you're in an interim role for, did you say the next year, the next academic year?
For the next coming academic year, yes. Yeah.
But I also know in higher ed, a lot of times we may see postings this fall for roles that will start the next year. So right now, if you were to stay in higher ed, what kind of role would you be looking for?
I'm pretty flexible. As I said, my former position, I was at the AVP role. I don't necessarily have to be at that. My interim role, I'm currently a director position, and I very much enjoyed that. So I'm flexible. I mean, for me, geography is a big piece of it. I'm not in a position in my personal life to pick up and go cross country or far away. But for me, I think, one of the areas that later in my career I got involved with, so I really very much enjoyed, was working in case management. In my prior position, I was the primary non-clinical case management person for the division, and really enjoyed working in that area. I was chaired the care team for 7 years and really enjoyed that. So there's a part of me that would love to, if the opportunity was there, to have to work, a primary role or a role that had a significant portion in the case management or the care aspect. I've always enjoyed that. I love the collaboration with other folks within the institution who sit on the care team, as well as the collaboration from all across an institution when you're trying to advocate and support a student, and you need to be working with folks outside of student affairs. I've always enjoyed that, and building those and establishing those relationships across the board. So Like I said, I'm flexible. I'm open. I don't need to, like I said, I don't need to be at a senior level. Just something that I feel is beneficial to the students, beneficial to the institution, and something that I feel like it's worthwhile for the work that I'm doing at that point.
Well, I think with the care team piece, there's such a need for that, and that just seems to be growing. So certainly, I would think over time some opportunities out there for that. And regardless of whether it's working a care team or working an AVP role or doing something outside of higher ed, I hope that you find a wonderful opportunity this next year that brings you joy.
Thank you. Thank you. And I didn't say it earlier, but the newsletter you've done has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's been a great resource, I think, for folks like myself and other people, just to the connection of knowing other people are kind of going through similar experiences. And like I said, you hit on some great topics and areas to focus on that I think have been very insightful, as well as insightful for the people going through it, but I think also is insightful for folks who maybe still currently in their roles, and hopefully they can learn from it as well, because like you said, down the road, they could find themselves in a similar situation.
Yeah, I hope not. But like you and I know, you never know.
No, hopefully not. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, John. This has been great. So thank you so much. And if you are watching this and you are a reluctant free agent, and if this has looked something that's not super scary and you want to be featured in an upcoming video, please message me on LinkedIn. And hopefully we will see you all soon. Thank you.